So tell us what a rent to own is. What does it mean? And why does anybody run a rent to own, Barry?
Rent to own, sometimes called lease options, is how come they all have two names? Why is that?
Yeah, get
It's
it straight.
wholesaling assignments, rent to
Get it
own lease
straight.
options. Um, is a strategy that helps people who want to buy a home now. They want to be homeowners now, and for various reasons, good legitimate reasons mostly, they are not able to be a homeowner now, but they want to be. So that's what rent to own does. That urge for home ownership is a powerful, powerful urge. Worldwide, we're no different in Canada. Home ownership is something that most people aspire to. Some of our younger folks don't mind being renters, but overall, people aspire to be homeowners. So, if you want to be a homeowner and you are a new Canadian, if you're a new Canadian, there are different rules if you're a new Canadian when you're going to the bank to get a mortgage. It's not as easy as if you're a resident of Canada or a citizen of Canada. If you have just started a new job, you might have a whiz bang great job that pays you a ton of money. But when you go to the bank and they want to know your economic history and whether your income will support the mortgage payments, they want you to have had that new job for, I believe, at least a year before they will give you credit for you being the lucky guy to have a great job that pays you a bunch of money. If you've started a new business, it's kind of the same thing as if you've started a new job. I think if you started a new business, banks want 2 years of operating income before they will let you borrow in the corporate name. If you have just been involved in a divorce, here you are, you're married, you have two incomes, you're keeping the ship afloat. Now you're divorced with one income to keep your ship afloat, but you still want to buy a property. What if you are a person that has really good income, but you haven't been much of a saver? And so that's important because, for example, if you're buying, say, here in Alberta, an average house at $400,000, and I know you guys in the Lower Mainland in the Golden Horseshoe are going 400,000. Kind of a
Yeah,
shack
right.
are you buying for that? If you get a conventional mortgage, you need to put down 20% of that $400,000 purchase price. That's $80,000 plus closing costs. If you're not a saver, accumulating 80 grand is tough for you to do. So divorce, new job, new company, new Canadian. People always look.
Let's not step over damaged credit. One of the thing about that we've seen over the years, Barry, is that in all sorts of situations, mistakes made, oversights, sticky spots in life, divorce. What happens with that credit rating can really set you behind. And so, although your job is secure, your income is decent, the bank looks at you and go, "No, you're still too high a risk. You're not ready, and we're not ready to finance that." So go get that cleaned up. Come back to me when we don't have all these kind of bad credit score things going on and marks on your bureau. I guess that's a pretty common one as well.
It is. It is a common one, and that can be something as kind of minor as missing a few bill payments. It can be as major as going through a bankruptcy or a consumer credit situation, a foreclosure. All of those have horrible effects on your credit, and repairing that credit can take an extensive amount of time. And it's kind of a continuum there. If if you're behind on some bills, if you've got too many credit cards, if you've got too many lines of credit that you access, but maybe you're not really behind, those kinds of things are fixable quicker. If you've got a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, those are harder to fix and take a lot longer, but you still want to buy a home. So there are many reasons why people who want to buy a home cannot qualify for a mortgage, and therefore they have to enter the rent to own space if home ownership is what they're looking for.
Well,
So that's
hence,
the background.
right. So that's perfect. And then to your point around this particular strategy, is that you then become the problem solver. Somebody would love to buy a home. They're not in a position to either qualify for a mortgage. They may not have the down payment today. They may have a scarred credit rating that doesn't allow them to get in. They need some time. They need 2-3 years to kind of get it all together before they can buy that property. So you come in as the problem solver and say, okay, we can make that happen sooner, and then we start to put a deal together on a rent to own. And walk us through kind of the process that we may go through, kind of high level, Barry, the process that we would go through to ultimately get somebody into a property, buy a property, get somebody into it, and then an exit kind of plan around it.
Okay. So that's a good summary, Patrick, of what we're facing in the rent to own space. So it starts with fielding inquiries from people who get in touch with you because your marketing program has people phoning you to say yes, they want to buy a home. It starts with you talking to people and analyzing their situation. And really what you're looking for is to identify the problem that right now is causing them not to be able to buy a property and saying, can we fix this problem? So that's what you do first. Assuming you come to a positive answer on that scenario, then you say, okay, now let's get into the details. What is it going to take to solve your problem, and how long is it going to take to fix that? Because that determines the length of the rent to own. If it's a problem that can be solved in a year, you might set up your rent to own for 18 months just to give a little flex to be able to make sure the problem is solved. If it's a bankruptcy where people's credit needs to be spotless for, I think, 7 years, that's a much longer RTO. But first, you analyze the problem and figure out what it takes to solve it. Like if you get over that step, then you start working with, as they say, your power team. And rent to own is the classic situation where you need a lawyer who understands it, a realtor who understands it, a mortgage broker who understands it. And so your next step, once you say somebody qualifies for your program, is you send them out shopping for a home that fits the financial criteria that you've established for them. You definitely guide them for the price point that they can buy at and the area they can buy at. So they're not going to be buying a mobile home on a 2-acre parcel of land 100 clicks from the nearest town. They're not going to be buying a unique house in a strange subdivision where there's maybe only one other person in the world who will like this house besides them. You're pretty much pushing them to reasonable houses in reasonable areas that fit the dollar figure that they're going to be able to qualify on your mortgage. And that's the kind of house that you tell them to go shopping for.
So Barry, when we look at this, let's give one layer of context for listeners is understanding that rent to own from a income strategy is also very effective. This is, again, it can be very, very lucrative in terms of what you get paid up front and we'll call it the option payment, and we'll let you explain that. But ultimately, this is also a lucrative way to generate and drive income. It doesn't have to be a full-time gig, although many do it. And I think what we need to point out here is that it's a very popular strategy, and there really isn't enough expertise filling the gap. And the gap's quite big, especially given what's happening in the world today and in our economic conditions and the banking conditions today. So I want to shine a light on that it is very lucrative and there's a big demand for it, but there's a lack of expertise that for people to take it on. And it doesn't have to be a full-time kind of gig. You could do 1 or 2 deals a year and still make good money and have a very kind of successful outcome, if you will. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. Like wholesaling, it lends itself to doing a deal every once in a while, as you just described. Or if you're really on it, you can turn it into a full-time business. So it's got that ability for sure, and it certainly has the ability to be lucrative for you as the rent-to-own operator. It also has the ability for you to set these up that other investors can get involved in deals that you set up, where both you as the operator and the investor as kind of the money partner can both do extremely well on rent to own. And why is that, Patrick? I mean, how do we make this a win-win and still make a decent dollar? I mean, sometimes people think those ideas are mutually exclusive, but that is definitely not the case in rent to own. So,
Well,
how
I
do
guess let's and let me just fill in a couple of gaps here, Barry, and I'd like you to walk us through the process a little bit. But
sure.
ultimately, the outcome is that you're supporting somebody in getting the home that they want, and they're a part of the process of choosing the home, or often they are. Most often, I guess you want them to be. They
Yes.
become your tenant, so they're going to be more respectful of the property. As a matter of fact, they'll probably want to build some sweat equity into that property right up front. So they're going to look after it. They're going to pay their rent on time. And on top of it, you're getting a premium for rent as well as the option payment. And this is really a kind of a cool scenario from an investment point of view because it takes a lot of risk off the table. Yes, there's a screening process and you got to make sure you get the right tenant buyer in there. But ultimately, this is a great scenario for any investor. And that's why you could attract capital partners that are going, oh, I'm only in for 2 or 3 years. This is my ROI. We see an in, we see an exit. It's not way out in the future like a buy and hold property. The exit's predetermined, and if everything goes as planned, it kind of works out that way. So that's a great scenario. But so let's walk us. Why don't you walk us through, Barry, the kind of the process of a rent to own and how we got there. So, for example, we've got a tenant buyer. There he is. Somebody or she, this family says, I need a home. I've got a job. My wife's got a job. 2 kids going to school. We want to live in this particular neighborhood. We need help. So, what would the structure of that deal, or how would we monetize it, and what would it kind of look like?
Well, Patrick, I think you just summed it up. I think we just replay what you just said. That clip is a perfect summary of exactly how it works. But uh,
Show me the money, Barry. Come on, man. Show me the money.
all right, so we find the property. Everybody agrees this is the property to buy. To get into the deal, the rent to own buyer signs a lease with you like you would sign with any tenant. Just if you have properties to rent, you have a lease that you use. That's the lease that you use with your tenant buyer. You also have them sign an option agreement. The option agreement says how much the option agreement gives them the right to buy the house in a particular period of time for a particular sum of money. So the option agreement says how much option money they're going to pay up front, how much they might pay every month, what's the price they're going to pay at the end of their 2 or 3 or 4 years worth of option time. So monetarily, and how you monetize this is, so let's take our $400,000 property. That's the example we're going to use. That's the cost of this house. These folks are going to have to accumulate, if they're going to go with CMHC, most people like to go with CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. That means that they're likely going to have to get a 90% mortgage and have 10% down. I know you can do 5% CMHC mortgages, but somehow, really, when you're doing rent to own, folks have to have 10% skin in the game. So 10% of 400,000 is $40,000. That's what they have to accumulate, say 3 years out. It's going to be a 3-year rent to own. So the first question is, you would like, as the operator, as the rent to own operator, you would like to get as big a chunk of that $40,000 paid upfront as what we call initial option consideration. Why do you want that? Well, one really good reason is that the more skin people have in the game, the more likely they are to be wanting to complete their deal. If you do RTO deals for no money down, that's easy for somebody to exit after a few months saying, well, this isn't working. I got to go. But
No
if
consequences. Yeah.
there's no consequence, there's no skin in the game. But if they put up $20,000 of the 40, then that's a lot harder to walk away from. So you monetarily get option money. And the option money, contrary to popular belief, does not have to go in some lawyer's trust account waiting for this deal to close in 3 years. Any option money paid, whether it's initial option money right at the beginning of the deal, or whether it's monthly option money, because remember they have to save another 20,000 over 3 years, that money is all yours. You can take that money. It's cash flow for you right now. You can take that money and do whatever you want with it. At the end of the deal, if the people close the deal, you give them credit for the $40,000 that they paid you over 3 years. If they don't close the deal, the money is yours. So it was yours. It's yours no matter what. So you get money right now. That's number one. Number two, you can get market or better rent. Market or better rent. You always get at least market. Sometimes you can charge a little bit more, which increases your cash flow. Number two or three, sorry, you get mortgage paydown. So over the course of that 3 years, the mortgage is diminished by the monthly payments. And number four, you usually build an equity appreciation number into the final price that people will pay. So the price, when you write the deal, is $400,000. The price goes up by what you think reasonable equity appreciation is where you live. And that's a local number. All real estate is local, Patrick, as I've heard you say any number of times.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get into average prices in Canada.
Let's
Patrick,
not.
let's not get into that. So what's a reasonable appreciation figure in your area? So 2%, 3%, 5%. I mean, when prices were going up 11% a month in Ontario, RTO operators were writing deals at 5% appreciation. But, that's a big number. You got to have a realistic number. And so those are the four ways that you generate money out of RTO deals. And they can be, at the end of 3 years, when you add up those numbers, it is totally not uncommon to have a return on investment of 20, 22, 24%. That, which if you divide with your investor, is 10, 12, 14%. And that's a low number, Patrick. I'm saying it as a low number because if you say to people, "Oh, yeah, you can earn 25% on this investment," they go, "Yeah. Tell me another one. Too good to be true. It must be." So we prefer to talk lower numbers, 10, 12, 14% for each investor, or sorry, for the operator and for the money partner. And that on a really a guaranteed investment, as much as any investment can be guaranteed, is fabulous return. So those are kind of how the numbers work, and they work differently if you have put an all cash deal in, or if there's a basic mortgage used to buy the property, or if there's a HELOC used to buy the property. So the numbers switch depending on which technique you use, but all of them produce great monthly cash flow and great profit.
Okay, so I'm going to be the naive student on this one, and I saw a gap, and I want you to fill the gap for me, the naive student.
Sure.
And I saw that I found this tenant buyer. We came to a conclusion on a particular property worth $400,000. We look at 10% down. They're going to need 40 grand for a down payment. They're going to give me 10, 15, 20 grand as an option that secures or gives them accountability, if you will. They've got skin in the game. So when we come time to close the deal, we've predetermined some way a number on exit, let's say, is 3 years down the road. Now, here's my question. Got it. So I've gotten the mortgage myself, and or I have a investor buyer that has got the mortgage and they've put it in their name, whatever the scenario is. And often it's an investor buyer, because if you're the kind of the person putting the deal together, you may not qualify for a mortgage anymore. You may not have the money yourself. Either way, you've got an investor involved, you've got this property on it, and you're doing your thing. You're paying premium on the rent. You're getting an option payment. Got it all. I got all that part. What didn't compute for me, Barry, is now in 3 years, if that property is worth $450,000 or $475,000 or whatever the number is, now my tenant buyer is going to go to the bank, and 10% is not of 400,000 anymore. It's of 450,000. Or what if it's 500,000? Now they got to come up with even more money. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Patrick, I thought you were going to say, what happens if the property is worth less than 400?
Well, no, no, no. We're
Three
we're we're
years.
we're way more savvy than that. We're watching the economic fundamentals. There's been no black swan events. We're going forward.
Sure. Um, if a property is worth more than that, what price have you agreed to sell to the buyer at? It's the option that you sign right at the beginning says how much the buyer has to pay. And so let's say it's set up, okay, your price is 400 today. At year one, it'll be 400 plus a 2% appreciation. So
Hmm.
2% appreciation on that. So that makes it 408,000. At
Yep.
the end of year two, 2% more on 408,000 brings it up to say 420,000 and
Hmm.
on to year three. So now we're at 435.
Hmm.
So under a classic option, the buyer would have to pay $435,000 to buy that property. Now he goes to his lender who does the appraisal and says, oh, this is worth $500,000. What does the buyer say?
Good news.
Good news. I've got $65,000 worth of instant equity, and maybe the bank will only lend to me on the appraised value, which is probably 435,000. But I am a happy camper because I can sell this place tomorrow and collect all the money I put in plus 65 grand. So
Hmm.
that's how that works. Now, some people say, on the operator investor side of it, oh man, I'm leaving a lot on the table here. But you can set up these deals so that the price that the buyer pays is not a set appreciating price of say 2% per year, but you can
Hmm.
set it up to say you have to pay the appraised value of the property by an AACI appraiser in 3 years. So then, as the operator, you would get more. That would then lead potentially to the buyer having to come up with a bit more money. But Patrick, that's a wonderful problem to have, and nobody I've ever dealt with has had any trouble dealing with it.
Well, and the reason I asked the question is fundamentally this: is that within rapid cash programs, there's always these little nuances, these little things, these questions, and then ultimately, part of getting the education and being part of the rapid cash program is that you're there, the team is there because you've got a team with you that is actually supporting and actually, because they're in the trenches solving these kinds of issues on a daily basis and seeing all these nuanced conversations that can unfold. That's really what it is about, so that you go away with a lot of answers. And then, of course, there's follow up to all of that whole weekend event. So I just wanted to shine a light on it, is that, here we are. I come at you with a little bit of a problem. You just go, yeah, okay, got it. This is how we handle those situations, because there's all sorts of scenarios in the world of real estate and rent to own.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is a good point. And I think it's important for people to hear that when you leave one of our events, you're not abandoned. We have a private Facebook group that any student who's ever taken one of our courses becomes a member of that group and has the ability to post to that private group. And I'll tell you, there's 500 plus people who can solve problems like crazy. I barely have to post in that group. They just take care of it themselves. Very supportive, Patrick.
I love it.